Well, as I stated before, my name is Jennifer Napalo, and this is my book, The Undertaking. It is a Christian fiction book, and it's based on the main character named Lee-Itawamba. I've gotten asked the question before of where did I come up with her name, and I always kind of liked the name Aaliyah, so I thought, well, that'd be a cute name to start out with. And the Daltoris part actually came from our church did, I don't know if any of you have heard, of course I know people from our church have, we've done a 30-hour famine is what it is. And we would get a name of a child to pray for during the famine, the fasting part. And the one that I had was, it was a girl's name, and her first name was Daltoris. And so I saw it pinned up on my board when I was trying to come up with a last name. And I said, that would be a good last name. So I just put them together and I thought, well, that works just fine. So that's where her name comes from. I've gotten asked that before. But the whole book is surrounded around her story and her walk with the Lord. She is just any typical Christian girl being raised up in the church and living life thinking that, you know, she's just going to be just like anybody else. Until she comes across a mysterious book in her Nana's attic as she was helping her Nana prepare for Christmas. And her Nana is a very eccentric woman, a hoarder of sorts, and so she had all kinds of interesting things in her attic. So she got distracted and she ended up finding this book that was very mysterious to her. Come to find out, this is a book that had been passed down through many generations that kind of reveals a calling that has been placed upon each of the ancestors' lives to be able to reach people and bring them to Christ. One of my favorite things is I love ancestry and I love genealogy, all that kind of stuff. And so that is also tied in here as well. I know Charlotte over here, she has actually read the book. I don't know if you read the book yet, Tabitha, or not. Okay. So Charlotte, at least, if you're wondering from, instead of my perspective, from someone who's actually read the book, you can ask Charlotte, she's read it. But I've gotten a lot of feedback. You're right, I did write the book mainly towards young adults because, like you said, that is a big area where there's really not much to go from as far as pointing that genre to Christ. And I keep on saying this, I'm not a writer by heart. This was not what I always wanted to do. This was not like what I thought my life would go towards at all. But I actually had a dream that was at least 3 days in a row. And it was such a vivid dream about this character. And I felt like God really placed on my heart and said, I want you to write about this. And I kept going, no. And I kept having the dream over and over again. And I would wake up each time thinking, this would make a great book or a great movie, you know. But then just kind of push it off, even though I felt like God was telling me, I want you to write this. And until the one morning I woke up and I was like, okay, well, Lord, you know I am not a writer. I was like, do you remember the grades that I got when I was in school? When I was supposed to write a short story or something? I mean, they weren't bad, but they weren't like publishing quality. And then God quickly reminded me, do you remember Moses? Do you remember Noah? I was like, oh, okay. I get it, Lord. And so as soon as I said okay to God, everything just flowed and everything just laid out. And I started to get a passion for the story and for the book, and it just went from there. I'm actually in the process of getting the sequel published to this as well. It'll be called Sacred Assembly. So it's a continuation of a few years later after this book. But in this story, Aaliyah is 13 years old. Starts out she's 13. She comes from a family of all brothers except for her. So we were just talking about families like that. She actually comes from a family like that. She has 2 older brothers, and then she has a twin brother. And so her life is completely surrounded by brothers who like to agitate, and then she also has this struggle of drama at school, And I'm sure all of us, we've all went to school, and I'm sure when you read this, you'll probably remember people that you had growing up that might reflect some of these characters. And that's why I was surprised when I actually had a lot of, instead of the genre I was reading towards more older adults that actually read the book and how much they loved it, I was like, oh, well, I guess maybe it could be for somebody older too, and it really opened my eyes as far as it could go further than what I thought it would. But does anybody have any questions about the book itself? Or maybe Charlotte, since you read the book, you might have questions about why I might have wrote something the way I did.
No, but I didn't hear the title of the second one because somebody was making.
Oh, because Charlotte was being loud. The second one's going to be called Sacred Assembly. So, which kind of lets you know that there's something bigger than herself. Her whole journey here is to finding out that God has a really big calling on her life. Even though she thought that maybe she'd just be like anybody else, any kind of regular church person that goes to church, does what they can, and helps the community just like anybody else, but she finds out that she's got a bigger calling on her life. And one that kind of opens up her spiritual eyes more so than most people probably would. But yeah, the Sacred Assembly, it has more characters in it as well. So it's fun coming up with characters because you get to kind of put yourself into somebody else's mindset a little bit and kind of see how they might think, which is also a difficult thing too when you try to have conversations between characters. Because I don't always think like some of these people probably would. But any questions?
What was your timeline like? You mentioned having a dream multiple times.
Yeah.
And then some period between having that dream and actually putting, pen to paper or typing and all that.
Right.
How long was the process until it actually was
Came
published
together.
and that kind of thing?
Well, this became fully publicized in 2016. And I started writing it towards the end, about November, December of 2014. So it was a good year, maybe almost 2, for the whole process. Like the writing process, like I said before, I'm a stay-at-home mom, and so my writing time was usually midnight or later. And my husband would be like, "When are you coming to bed?" I'm like, "I'm almost done. Just let me finish this page. Just hold on." Because I knew that if I went to bed and I'd come back, my mind would not be in the same mind frame and it would be ruined. So I had to, even rub my eyes and try to type out. And I'd come back and reread stuff. I was like, what was I writing? Sometimes the sentences didn't make sense. And I was like, what was I trying to say? But yeah, so it was a lot of late nights and different periods where I'd have to go back and reread what I was thinking. I mean, I did like an outline. My process, I'm sure, is not like anybody else's. Whatever ideas that I have where I want the book to go, that's how I write it out. And then I'll go back through and kind of make little outlines of things and little bullet points of what I want to happen. And like I left it at home, but I have my notebook that I had when I started. And all of my scribblings, all the stuff that never got put in the book either is all in there too. And all of my drawings that I had, and all of those things are compiled into there, even for the second book. So, but I'm also known to leave you hanging at the end, which is why there's a second one. And spoiler, that one leaves you hanging too, so there'll probably be the third one. But everyone that has read it has said, I want the second one. I was like, well, that one's not ready yet. But so if you don't mind, I'll read the first part of it to kind of give you an idea of what it all entails and how far back this actually goes. So I was thinking, what's the best way to kind of bring you in? I was like, well, I'll just read the first of the Christian Faith Publishing published it. They're based out of Pennsylvania. I was actually kind of stuck with that too, because there are so many different avenues to take these days as far as getting a book published. And a lot of them didn't suit me, and the process didn't suit me. Because a lot of like your big publications, they don't take manuscripts in. You have to have like somebody outside that knows you, that knows somebody to get your stuff in there. So I thought, well, Lord, you wanted me to do this, so I'm going to just let you do it on your own terms, and I'll just sit back, because it was ready at that point. I had finished editing it, and all my thoughts were in there. And I was actually sitting in my living room, and a commercial came up for Christian Faith Publishing. And I'm not one that usually sits there and watches commercials. But for whatever reason, I was sitting there and watching it. And the question that it says, did you write a book and you would like to have it published? And I'm sitting there going, yeah, yes, that's me. Yes, I did. And so I thought, well, can't lose anything. So I looked into them and just sent them an author kit that they hand out to let you know what all they provide for you. And then I got talking to the main lady that I talked to the first time, and her name was Linda. She was very sweet, and I gave her just a synopsis of the book, and she's like, that sounds great. And we don't have anything that we publish that is in that age range for the young adults. And I was like, great, because now I'm going to be someone who actually sticks out. I'm not going to be just like, I'm not going to be another children's author or something that's just going to blend in with everybody else. So they had to go to the review board. Excuse me. And the review board got back within 2 days after looking over it, and they wanted to partner with me. And it just kind of went from there because they really liked the book. So, and I'm really excited because Christian Faith Publishing is actually going to choose 2 books, a children's book and a regular adult book or young adult, whatever they decide, to do a movie with. So they're going to do a children's book, a movie, and then one of their other books, a movie. And of course, I'm one of many in that poll, but of course, and I'm sure everybody that has gotten a book published through them is like, oh, that's going to be me. But it got me excited because I was like, this would be a really good movie. But that's me tooting my own horn. But I'll just read the preface here. It's just really only like a page worth. But here we go. It says, the overwhelming thoughts in his mind tortured the very depths of his soul. Joash could no longer contain the words strolling through his mind. He grabbed the closest writing utensil and began to write these words. My child, your life today is forever changed. The thoughts and fears you once had are no longer yours. The words didn't make sense to him, but he continued to write. The words quickly grew into a pile of papers that sat before him. As he wrote, he felt the Spirit speak to him, revealing the purpose for the book he created. It was for his son Gideon, who was about to take a journey into a spiritual battle. Which, of course, I'm talking about Gideon that you've heard in the Bible. Little did Joash know that these words meant for his son would travel through time. Generation after generation, ancestors would write letters of encouragement or tell their stories of their own experiences with the spirit realm. Each were then added to Joash's words, which quickly formed into a book that inherited the name The Conquest. For many years, the book became lost between generations. In fact, many of the recent descendants of Joash have no idea who was the last to obtain it, much less know that it exists. However, this was about to change. I'm about to tell you of a girl who found this very book that has been lost for so long. My identity is not important, for now at least, but hers is very important. Her whole existence wraps around this book and the power she will obtain through her special gift. So that's just the beginning, the little taste to kind of draw you in to her story. I see this, I'm going to want to stay back up now that I've moved it. But yeah, so it might sound a little out there, but her gift is that she is able to see the spirit realm. And by that I mean that she's able to see when good versus evil are coming together and how she is able to intervene for somebody. there's ancestors in here. One of them's name is John, and she, in a dream, kind of gets wrapped up into his story. And he's actually on the battlefield. And while on the battlefield, she finds out that obviously he's one of her ancestors. And she's able to have this conversation with him and find out more about what she's supposed to do in her calling of helping people. His job, while he was on the battlefield, was to help those around him, the other soldiers, come to know Christ. And through that, he was able to see the spirit realm and see how the evil was working on their lives and help them through it. And like, I know it sounds a little maybe out there to most, but it's not so much, the whole book's not so much wrapped up in like demons and angels. It's not like that. I know I sat down and had another talking like this at my home library, and one of the ladies, when I brought up about the spirit realm, she was like, "Oh," and I was like, "It's not like that. Let me explain." And so I kind of had to like roll her back in, and so she wasn't completely like, "Well, I'm not reading that book." But no, it's more about her calling and being able to have this special gift where she's actually able to see more than what we see, and able to come to the rescue for others and help them to understand that God has a purpose for you. God has a calling for you. I actually had, I homeschool. I had another homeschool mother tell me that after her son read this, that he was now able to understand what his calling was in life, and that the book really helped him focus on the fact that God wanted him to be a missionary and to accept that calling. So that made me feel really good. I was like, yes, Lord, you're doing something with this book more than what I thought it could ever happen. But any questions on what I've said so far? I feel like I've been talking this whole entire time.
It sounds like an interesting book. I'd like to read it.
Well, good. I'm glad. It is. It does. It takes you on many different aspects of a life that you're raised in church and you feel like you should be doing life a certain way, but God says, I got something else for you. And that's the main message that comes through this, is that the calling that God has on your life is bigger than what we can imagine. We are able to impact more people than what we could ever think, just by having a conversation with somebody. You don't know what kind of impact that you've had. And just because she has this extra special gift that no one else really has except for other people in her family that she knows of, she's able to do a little bit more than what she ever thought she could. So it's interesting, and it threw me for a loop whenever I kept having the dreams, but yeah.
Do you ever go back after you've got it written, covered, all of this? Do you ever go back and read and think, well, I should have did this, or I should have?
Yes. Yes, I did, because my daughter wanted me to read the book to her after it was published. I kept one for myself, and she was like, Mom, can you read me your book at night? I was like, sure, why not? And as I was reading it, of course, I'm seeing like all the different editing errors too that I did not catch, or they didn't catch either. And I was like, because I'm reading it out loud. It's a whole other thing when you read something out loud. And I was reading, I was like, oh, well, that doesn't make sense. Or, it was probably one of those really late nights where I was just typing, and that's how it came out of my head at like 2 o'clock in the morning when I wasn't thinking right. But yeah, I have, and there's different things that I might have changed, but looking back at it now and how I've done things with the second book, I wouldn't change it now, but, well, I couldn't change it.
Gotten used to it, I guess, but now
Yeah. I was like, it's already out there, I'm not gonna, you already ripped off the Band-Aid, it's done, yeah. But yeah. Well, Charlotte, I'll ask you, since you read it, what did you like about the book?
Well, you said most of it, but
No.
it also, to me, teaches you gotta listen
Yeah,
to what he's telling you.
right,
To follow what he's telling you, where to go.
Right.
Where he's guiding you.
mm-hmm.
Even at a young age, you gotta start.
Mm-hmm. That's
listening.
true, yeah. She has a spirit guide in here that starts out as like this blue little orb that she sees, and she's kind of like, what? You know, like sometimes when you look into a light and you kind of have this, that's what she thought was going on. But God was sending her an angel of sorts to come and help her work her way into this calling that she has, to kind of ease it in for her. But instead it completely freaks her out. And of course, I think it would freak out anybody if you would come in contact with an angel of any kind. I often wonder how it actually looked on people's faces in the Bible when an angel had actually appeared to them, you know. So, but yeah, she gets a few different times where she is thrown into dreams and has contact with certain ancestors through these dreams and is able to have conversations with them to help her. And she finds out that this book, The Conquest, that I mentioned as I was reading the preface, that book actually has letters in there or little snippets or prayers or complaints or anything from ancestors previous that while they went through their journey. Which I think is another important part, that when we're going through this walk with Christ, we can't do it on our own. We have to rely on others, whether it's family members or other people in our church or in our community that we know that we're able to come to and get guidance and information from and help when we're in a place where we're just not sure what to do. So there's a lot of underlying meaning under everything. A lot of it was geared towards a younger generation, so they will like the fact that you'll have all this extra stuff, like being able to see things that you wouldn't normally be able to see, and you know, odd things like that. but yeah.
Is the
Anything else?
second one is she gonna be aged any, or is it gonna?
Yes, the second one, it'll be 3 years after. So she'll be in her senior year of high school, and her twin brother. And see, in this book, she's faced with a lot of things that a lot of kids deal with. Excuse me. She's dealing with brothers and all that comes with having brothers. At school, she has this once was a friend, now is a bully kind of person at school that she's dealing with. She's dealing with this crush that she has, only to come to find out that he's not who she thought he was, and realizes that her focus was on the wrong thing the whole time, and that she needed to be focusing on what God wanted instead of what she wanted. And then she gets thrown into this, oh hey, by the way, and God wants you to do this as well. So she's got all this stuff going on and trying to find that place of peace and understanding, and constantly going, oh, what now, you know? And I'm sure we all feel that way sometimes, like, what now? What else could go wrong? But yeah, she has a lot of that going on in this book. In the second book, things are kind of mellow at first, and she feels like she's kind of got a hold on the calling that God wants her to have, but it's kind of been quiet, a little too quiet compared to what she's been dealing with. And so she just thought that that's all she was supposed to do, you know, get ready for college, but then God had something else for her once again. So yeah, the second one throws her back into having to deal with the fact that she's got a job to do as a warrior for Christ, and to not be complacent with sitting back and not doing something about it. So, yeah. But that'll be in the process. Hopefully, maybe by the end of this year, beginning of next year, it'll get published. Just depending on how slow things go. It can be slow sometimes. A lot of times it's on their part, and the other times it's on me having to reread stuff. But any other questions?
Did you illustrate the book?
No. Well, I had the ideas for here. See, on the front, what I really wanted they weren't able to do, so I had to come up with a plan B. What I really wanted to do is I wanted the book to kind of look like the book that she finds, which is like old, and of course I can't like tatter up a book, but you know, I wanted to have that old look. And they said that the company that they work with as far as the printing press goes, they weren't able to do that. So I was like, oh, okay. So, but this, does have meaning. These vines with the leaves, each of these leaves represent an ancestor that she comes in contact with. Not all necessarily in this book either. Throughout the next book and the third book that will eventually happen. But so it shows her connection with her ancestors and her family and the calling that she has on her life and how that's been passed down. So there is meaning there. There's in the inside as well, because I didn't want the pages to look too dull. There's vines that continue on the bottom to kind of remind you that this isn't something that just started with her. It's something that has been passed on through generations, and there's a bigger picture to it all.
There's also a Bible quote, I am the vine, you are the branches.
Yeah, you're right. That is true.
That's what I thought when I saw the vines. I thought about the Bible quote.
Mm-hmm. And that would tie right into that as well. Yeah. Any other questions? Comments?
You didn't bring any with you.
I did.
Did you?
I did. I did bring some with me. I'll read the synopsis on the back here for you, which is also, I will give you, I don't know if anyone else has ever really said this to you as an author, but being a first-time author, there's a lot you don't know what you're supposed to do. And I didn't know if like the publisher would actually write the synopsis for you, or how that all happened. And so then they would ask me, okay, can you send us your synopsis? And I was like, oh, I have to write that? Okay. So then I was like, okay, how am I going to try to write this in the back? So in case you never knew that, when you go to pick up a book, what is written on the back, the author had to write that, just so you know. And they also have to write about themselves as well, if you don't know that. So when you get to the part where it's about the author, they had to write that about themselves. So I might be giving you some information you never had before. Because I didn't know that either. I thought, oh, well, I'm going to give them some information, they'll wrap it up and make it look pretty in the back. And nope, I had to write about myself, which is not easy, by the way. But this is the synopsis on the back. It says, when the Bible talks about spiritual gifts, Lee-Itawamba assumes she would be like most people and fall into a category of silent leaders in the church. However, this typical teenager stumbles across a family secret, or should I say a family gift, that changes her whole world. As if dealing with everyday drama at school and home wasn't enough, Aaliyah soon finds out that she is part of something much bigger than herself. She struggles to find the balance between the world she knows and the world that she discovers around her. So that is the synopsis of this book. Did she get tired? Oh.
So on your second one, you may have other people that will
Yes.
give you praise
Yes.
for the first book.
Right. I'm going to be able to tie in some more things the second time. I won't be scrapping for anything to write in there for that part. Yeah. But yeah. Anything else? I hope you all would get a copy and share it with others as well. Like I said, this will go across generations and might even help your walk with the Lord and maybe see things a little bit differently of what God wants you to do in your life. And, you're never too young or too old to let God use you, so.
Well, thank you, Miss Napalo.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
each for being here. Just one quick reminder before we wrap up. Our next luncheon with books will be May 25th. Our speaker then will be Miss Jo McDivitt. She was one of the essayists for the book Year in Mississippi, which is, I think it's actually 52 essays, each one for a different week of the year, of course, on different seasonal events in Mississippi, like the Neshoba County Fair, things like that. So she seems like a very interesting lady. She's been redoing an older home in Blue Mountain, and that will be interesting to meet her. And she's a big library supporter, as I understand. So I'm excited to meet her on May 25th. Thank you.
That's good. Thank you, guys.
All right,
I'll put up some copies up here if you guys just want to look through it.